Warm greetings and welcome to today's edition of the African Leadership Group, the Nigerian Leadership Series. My name is Itwa Igodalo, and I'm happy to be here with you today. And we're looking at a very, very critical subject, especially in Africa. And possibly welcome to today's edition of especially in Africa and possibly in Nigeria, the issue of corruption, and the cost thereof. You know, a lot of people do not know what corruption really is, what it costs, what it involves, and what a lot of us are losing by having corruption in different spheres of life. Corruption in government, corruption in private life, corruption even in the church, corruption in our various homes and families. And we just thought that we should look at this so that people are aware, people are sensitized, and we can channel people towards this non-corrupt environment, the challenge of corruption, and make sure that people get the benefits of the available resources in a well-apportioned manner in society. Joining me to present today, as usual, will be Pastor Sonny Enebi. I do believe he's on the call, and also Jumoke Akintelo, my two vice presidents at this point in time. And we have a very, very erudite gentleman, Dr. Bolaji Akinyemi, the BOT chairman of Project Victory, the Call Initiative and PVC Niger. He did a lot of campaign for PVC registration and all that prior to the elections. He's a farmer by training and practice, and his leadership evolved from his days at NIFES, where he served as prayer secretary at the Lagos Polytechnic Ikorodu, now the Lagos State University of Technology. As a teacher of God's word with an apostolic mandate to set an order, is a man with uncommon dissectional grace and prophetic touch in Bible interpretation. He is well sought for, accounting for several awards and doctorate honors, most recently being the Doctor of Letters from Glowing Light Technological College, GlowTech, in recognition of his literary grace and his nation-shaping ideas. He's President, Voice of His Word Ministries, a man of many productive parts, and he also serves as CEO, Master Builder Communications. Let me stop there. It's a longish CV, but I think Dr. Akinyemi can say a bit more about himself if he so desires. But let me welcome him very, very warmly to the Nigerian Leadership Series program for today. Doctor, you are welcome. Thank you for your friendship, and thank you for all your efforts in nation building. How are things going?
We thank God. Thank you so much, my big brother in the faith and big brother otherwise. The otherwise will be behind the camera so that I won't have to bring the yam as soon as possible. Thank you so much for having me, sir, and giving me the privilege to be part of this session this evening.
Thank you. I have introduced you as a doctor of letters, as a farmer by training and practice, and also as a man of God. I'm not sure many people know you as a farmer. How come you're a farmer? What do you plant? And how is farming these days?
Well, basically, I read agriculture at the Polytechnic and left to start up a farm. It was while on the farm that the call of God came. And one way or the other, we have maintained that culture over time. So like Abraham, I think it's in the blood.
Okay, so do you still run a farm, full or part-time, or you've left farming completely?
Of course, part-time, not completely.
Okay, what do you grow on this farm?
Basically, I'm into animal production, poultry, backyard kind of arrangement for now, sir.
Yeah, I'm very interested because I'm sure you probably don't realize that I'm the son of farmers. My mother was a farmer also. When she retired from this, in fact, while she was in the civil service, she had an active poultry. And when she retired from the civil service, she focused on her poultry and built it up to almost 10,000 birds at a certain time.
That's big.
Yeah, at a certain time on 2 locations, one at the back of our house, and then the other on the farm that she had in a place they now call Olomi. And part of our routine growing up was to wake up on Saturdays and head in my mother's 404 station wagon to the farm to help the farmers plant corn and yam and cassava, harvest corn, roast it on the farm, and then the poultry also started. So, and then my father too had a big farm in Edo State and did a bit of hunting there as well. So I have this tendency for farming. So that's why I'm so excited to know that you're a farmer.
Well, I think that that's one of the culture that we're losing as a nation. Growing up, quite a number of families were involved in one level of farming or the other, whether small scale or big scale or backyard scale, you know. But these days, nobody wants to, labor that hard, and everybody is looking for the soft life. And we have challenges with food production and related issues.
Yeah, we do, don't we? I wish Nigeria, for instance, could stop importation of anything edible or consumable and have us guided to grow what we eat and eat what we grow. It will save us tons in foreign exchange.
I think maybe we should look at that from the point of a corrupted culture, because the corruption is in different phases. Because if our culture is not corrupted, how do you relate the size of Nigeria with our inability to feed our population? And when a nation as small as the modern Israel is able to feed ourselves and still export quite a chunk of food, I think it's an area where we need to encourage every Nigerian, one way or the other, to get it started.
Yeah, it's very important. Many issues to deal with in Nigeria, and I'm praying that we can get direction in that area. How would you define corruption? Because we're speaking today on the cost of corruption. How would you define on a broad basis, paintbrush, what is corruption? Because you'll be surprised that quite a lot of people do not even know what corruption really is.
I think basically when we're talking about definition, quite a number of Nigerians may not know the intellectual definition of corruption. But experientially, there's no way you will be a Nigerian and say you don't know or you've not been touched by corruption one way or the other. So while we are, looking at the intellectual content of the word corruption, we also should be mindful of the experiential and bring to bear the balance. Now, corruption basically simply means dishonesty, fraudulent conduct by those who are in power. And so one way or the other, it touches everyone. But typically it has to do with, bribery and all that are related to it. But for us as a people, corruption is that pothole at the middle of a highway causing accident. How do we get the pothole to be there? For example, we have had 5 administration, over the construction of Lagos-Ibadan Express Road, 5 administration. We have had the administration that initiated the road. We have had other administration. After that, we have had the immediate past administration spent 8 years and the road is still under construction. And now we have the 5th administration in place. Now, these are basic issues. These are issues we really need to look at. And I was particularly excited when I got the topic of discussion being cost of corruption, because I know that you are one of the finest accountants in the country, and I know that I will be bringing you to task, even on the set, not just beyond discussing corruption. What are the institutional things that we can do with those of you who are professional, with the professional bodies in the country, to be able to quantify? Because if we do not quantify what we're losing to corruption, we may necessarily not be angry at taking the bull by the horn and doing something about it. The loss to corruption is very, very huge, beyond the loss of life to corruption, which should be unforgivable. We still talk about materials, resources of money, and of person. So I think by and large, nobody in Nigeria can say he doesn't know the meaning of corruption. We may not know the definition, but we are touched by corruption one way or the other.
Pastor, is Pastor's video frozen?
I think so. I'll get it sorted now.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Akinyemi. And I particularly like the way we're starting off in terms of the cost of corruption. What really is the cost of corruption to a developing nation or a populous nation like Nigeria? If you could just take us through that, I would like us to really start that conversation. And you also mentioned corruption by the leaders, but I want us to dig deeper into that, because the cost of corruption is not only just the leaders. If you can expatiate on that while we're waiting for Mr. President to rejoin the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think when you're talking about cost, there's no way you talk about cost and not talk about figures, but basically I will leave that to, the professionals in that field to be able to come up with the figures. But looking at corruption, I don't want us to just look at corruption from the perspective of leadership and the perspective of followers. We have to look at it in context of our society. What is the cost of corruption of an illiterate driver to the Nigerian road, to the passengers who are inside the bus, and of course to other road users? We had a situation where a driver drove a staff bus belonging to government and drove them right in front of a moving train when he saw the train coming. What is the quality of education that this driver had, before that situation? We have persons who are literate in the bus. Some of them died, some of them survived. So when we are looking at the cost of corruption, we're not just looking at it from the point of figures and all of that. Even on things that we ought to have put in place as a nation, basic as education. I was somewhere around the Keja, and a truck was moving, and the electric cable was hanging low, and the boy Hop decided to use his hand, to pack the electric cable, and you can guess what the scene became. Now, I couldn't fathom that somebody in this age will not know that that thing is dead hanging over its head. Now, that is the cost of corruption, because we have failed over time to give education to people who needs them. And presently now we are increasing the cost of education to a society where education is the greatest need of our population. So by and large, we need to sit down and do an holistic work to be able to put on paper. Accountant, we call it cost accounting, reporting and doing the analysis of a company cost structure. We need to do a report and analysis on the cost of corruption to us as a nation. There's no way we put it in black and white, and we will not be angry of where we have brought ourselves to. If we put side by side the nation of Nigeria between a nation like United Arab Emirates, and then look at the progress they have made between 1999 and the progress or retrogression that we have made between then and now. These are things that we need to do. It will help our government, it will help the people, it will help every one of us to know that we cannot continue like this.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. President is back in now.
All right, thank you very much. I was actually listening to a lot of that conversation. The boy hanging from the bus and holding the wire. Did the wire electrocute him, or you didn't complete it, or what happened?
Of course, it was electrocuted.
Oh, no. And endangered the rest of the bus.
No, it was a truck, this lorry load truck. So he left alone.
Oh, no. Oh, what a pity. That's real ignorance out there.
Yes, sir.
So what's the history? Has Nigeria always been corrupt, or is it something we came and met and found, or is there a history of corruption over the years and so on and so forth? What is your thinking?
Well, I think every human society has always been corrupt one way or the other. It's just that at one point or in the course of our history, we let down our guard and we allow corruption to take the better part of us. As it is now, corruption is institutionalized and it's difficult for us to continue this way. We have to stand up and give corruption the biggest fight that we can give to. If we remember one of the statement made by the immediate past president that I will never forget is the fact that if we do not kill corruption, corruption will kill Nigeria. And I think corruption is dagger drawn at our soul, aiming for it. And what we need to do now is bring in the survivor element, the survivor instinct in us to bear, to decide that we want to live, and corruption, we have to die.
All right, thank you very much. Can you just give a broad stroke, painting a paintbrush stroke of the cost of corruption and what corruption is doing to our nation as best as you can? I know you say you're not an accountant and that you leave the figures to me, but at least you can give the narration. For example, I saw a tape, I think it was a Ghanaian, who was talking about the real cost of corruption. And he says one of the costs of corruption is brain drain, people leaving the country and going somewhere else and blah, blah, blah. So what are the areas that this thing called corruption has been costing us, and what are the outcomes that we're having, and how has it affected our development,
Basically, the area where we are badly hit is in the area of infrastructural development, or let me say development generally. The state of our hospitals are a reflection of the level of corruption that is in the country. You hardly can get to a general hospital and get a vacant bed. Recently somebody was rushed to the hospital. The hospital were willing to admit him, and then they transfer him from the general hospital in my area to the general hospital in Ikeja because there was no bed in my area. And then when they got to Ikeja, there was no bed in Ikeja. And then when he got to Ikeja referred him to Lut, and he got to Lut, and there was no bed at Lut. And then he has to be admitted inside the car, treated inside the car. It was a very horrible sight. Now, these are the ripples effect of corruption. Then we talk about the state of our school and the quality of education that we're giving to our children. We get to interact with people who are product of the university system in Nigeria, and some of them will make statements, and you will wonder if they were true primary school, not to talk of secondary school, and then you're talking about university education. These are the results of corruption. You want to talk about the state of Nigerian road. You can't travel, you hardly can travel a 20-kilometer stretch anywhere in this country without noticing a pothole. And some of them are no longer potholes. They are actually road gullies. And these are result of corruption. Then you go into the employment system, where you hardly get to hear that the government is announcing employment, and yet people are getting into the system. The question is, how are they getting in? At what point were those positions advertised for filling? So these altogether has affected the quality of leadership that we're chalking out. And you also will agree with me that even our leaders are not spared. And then this is beginning to snowball into an embarrassing situation, as we see from the jam score palaver that we had recently, and that drag on for a very lengthy time, embarrassing us as a nation. These are all, complication of corruption that we have enabled over the years.
Any other issues on corruption that you want to mention before I ask my question, and then I'll turn over to Jumoke and Sonny to take you up on a few questions, and then we'll have the general open floor.
Well, can we ever talk about corruption without talking about subsidy and the petroleum sector? And just look at where we are, because we failed to do what we ought to do over time. And up until now, Nigerians are still wondering, why is it that no investment has been made in refinery? But the truth of the matter is, can we excuse the volume of money that was poured into the turnaround maintenance of those refineries for years, over a decade, and then not for once did we get a liter of product from, what we have given so much to? That is one area that we cannot overlook. And if you allow me, I will say that for me, one area I'm looking forward to rating this government is in the area of its preparedness to fight corruption. We're looking forward to the appointment of the EFCC chairman and what will be the operation modus of that government, or rather that agency. I'm looking forward to the opening up of the book, of the state government, the federal government from 1999 to date. Because if we do not address the past and evaluate where we err, where we made mistake, moving forward will be a mirage. You cannot move forward if you cannot quantify the mistakes that you have made as an individual, whether as a family, as a small company, a big company. Is important. The past must be properly evaluated before you take your decision moving forward. And trying to avoid these will always leave us in the mess that we are ever struggling to come out from.
Okay. I hope it's going to be possible for us to really do this and stem the cause of corruption. What, in your own opinion, do you think can be done in this country to stem the tide of corruption? What are those hard decisions or things that we need to do as a nation and as a people to fight corruption?
Basically, one of the things that have enabled the system, the corruption in the system, is the type of the strange type of federal system, the federation that we are practicing. It is strange, the bedrock of our corruption, the foundation of our corruption is in the word "we the people of Nigeria," suggesting that at one time or the other we sat down to evaluate the country and take a decision on how we want to live together. But that never happened. And then living together at first certain elements, certain person, call them clique, call them whatever you want to call them, to hold each and every one of us down, and then tends to perpetrate their clique in power and taking on to abuse the country. So if we do not address the foundation upon which this country is built, the foundation upon which our Tower of Babel, which is bent, which we must make attempt to demolish and of course to rebuild. If we do not review the foundation, then we will not be able to do anything meaningful. It is critical at this point that we must restructure this country. We must visit our Article of Union vis-a-vis the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. That is the first thing to do. Without that, any other thing we are doing is a huge and big joke.
What do you think a review of the Constitution is going to achieve? And how will that help to fight corruption?
Of course, there will be regionalization. This idea of it is my turn. When I get into the center, it's my turn to benefit my people, my turn to benefit my tribe. That is the mentality, because all the resources from the region occurs to the center, and then somebody at the center seat to divide it to the rest of us. That in itself it's enabling, the unbelievable level of corruption that we have witnessed.
Okay, so you think too much resource goes for the temptation of managing of resource at the center. It's about now, if you regionalize, will not the resource go to the regions, and then the managers of the resource at the regions also will over control that resource, and the people in the villages and in the local governments will also be starved of development? Will it not just simply repeat itself?
Well,
now the regional instead of centralized.
We might have a similar situation, but not exactly the same kind of situation. Now we have thieves, and then some of the thieves are, let me say, I have my thieves, and then the man from the north has his thief, and it's my responsibility now to protect my thief, because what is stealing belongs to Nigeria and not to us, not to our family. And whatever is bringing to the table, we can share back at my region. Now, these mentalities are the problem that are, breeding the level of uncontrollable corruption that we have. But if what belongs to each of the region is held in the region, and then they want to look at their brother, take the whole thing and keep it behind his door, fine and well. But I think we need to take that step as a matter of priority. And then when we get to that level, we will now continue to fight it at that level.
Okay, but I think it might be a bit deeper than that, because even in states, not to talk of regions, there's corruption to some certain extent. Governors take the resource of the state and do with it as they like in some instances, here and there, and everybody is kept quiet or whatever it is. And then again, there's also corruption even in institutions. In institutions, both private and quasi-government institutions, there's corruption. Even in the church, there is corruption here and there. How do you, and they don't have anything to divide. It's just that some people are in control of resource. And wherever people seem to be in control of resource, they tend to control it into their own direction. What do you think about this?
Absolutely in order. But the truth of the matter is, when we go the restructuring route, it will enable us travel the lane, travel from federal to state, from state to local government. Because this issue is not just about, going to your region. For example, we know that local government presently, as constituted, are at the mercy of the state government. We have to be holistic about it and free the local government as it should be in a federal system of government. If you look at the issue, the cry over state police, the question is, even if you give state police to state governor, we have seen governors who don't control the state police, but who are using the federal police to harass individuals, even to the point of death. We have it all over the place, in the course of our history. So the truth of the matter is, this corruption fight must start at the level where it is being controlled from. Corruption has a way of batting corruption. Corruption presently battered by the corruption at the federal level. Now, if we address the federal level, we can take it down to institution, and we know why the institutions are corrupt as it is, because the federal government holds so much power, and in a bid to pledge allegiance and loyalty, we have complications resulting, which we now term as corruption.
All right. Any other solutions to this corruption issue, aside from constitutional amendments and regionalization? What else do you think can help to break the back of, you say, the institutionalization of corruption in our general atmosphere? And Jumoke, you can take on from here.
Basically, we have to look at how do we incorporate meritocracy into our democracy. And if we have meritocracy, people earning what they deserve, people getting promoted because they deserve it, people getting on job because they had the best for the job, this we institutionalize a culture of giving your best and knowing that you can hold a particular space for as long as you are the most qualified, for as long as you are giving your best. And if you stop giving your best, these are cultural values that goes with entrenching righteousness, permit me, or uprightness, or honesty in a system.
Thank you so much for that response. I want to follow up. I want to take a slightly different direction, and I want to focus on the roles of citizens and we as Nigerians in the cost of corruption. Oftentimes, when we're talking about corruption, we're looking at a select few of people. We're looking at maybe the political elites, but I want us to really delve more into our own role and the societal contribution to corruption. You talked about cultural values, which is really at the heart of corruption, because you can't have corruption if we don't have corrupt moral values or a dysfunctional society. So, especially as a minister, I want you to speak a little bit about how we as Nigerians also in our everyday practices or life contribute to this cost of corruption in the nation, because that's how we enable the rulers to continue to be corrupt.
Well, basically, I think one of the things that we have to look at is put greatness in context, because everyone is driving for greatness. They want to be great. You look at professionals want to be great. People in ministry want to be great. Those who are politicians want to be great. So if we put greatness in context, what does it mean to be great? Now, if you look at the promise of God to Abraham, the first thing that God promised Abraham was the fact that he was going to give him a name. He was going to make his name great, and then he was going to make him a blessing. Now, you cannot be great without a great name. And growing up, the most common phrase I always hear from my parents, from my father, my mother, and everyone around is, remember the son of whom you are, not your humanity in worship. It was like it rhymes everywhere you go. This family is saying it to their children everywhere you turn, is the same thing. Now, these one way or the other help shaping the persons that we have come, we have become. Now, what is the same thing? What are the things rather that have been said to the children growing up nowadays? We saw a situation where a mother somewhere in Ikorodu assisted his son to kill her daughter because they want to be great. They want to make money. Now, as they were caught by the police, but let's assume that they were not caught and this boy become a very great man. Now, what do you think it will impact? What do you think he has to transfer to his children at helping them become great? So we cannot but address the issue of the cultural value. We have to reorientate our family, and it's not just something for church and for the monks to do, because growing up, it wasn't even a church thing. It was a cultural thing. So, and we have a society today where the culture is daily getting eroded, and the strange culture are taking the place of what we used to know as our culture and what we used to know as our value. So I believe that as government, as a people, we need to begin to sound it on the need for us to build a legacy, not a legacy of properties, but a legacy of a name, like we have some of our political leaders in the past that we revere, left with us. People like Chief Obafemi Awolowo, the sage. What is really left behind is not the property for the family, but the name for the family. So once we begin to come to terms with the fact that name is of essence, name is important, then we begin to begin to attach little value to material things, and then be careful of not soiling her name, which was a sustenance of values way back in the past.
Thank you. And I'm going to call on Pastor Sonny, but I want to ask one more question, because you did say that until we repair or rebuild the foundation of the country, and you talked about how the country came together. But we're not talking about cultural and societal values that we need to rebuild. So at what point did the values that we grew up with, and I'm a product of the 60s, at what point did we erode those values of integrity, of good name, for value of money, the almighty dollar? Because we're talking about, this is a society now where the most corrupt are the ones celebrated, are the ones that have now acquired wealth, irregardless of how they got it, are the ones that are celebrated. So how do we go back to rebuilding that foundation? Not just the constitution, because still Nigerians are not going to change, whether we are still Nigerians, right? Whether we now become Odua nation, is still the people that were in this Nigeria. So how do we go back and change those foundational values that have been eroded, or rebuild those foundational values? Because that's part of corruption, right? That's part of the cost of corruption.
Absolutely. You said at what point, and then how do we go back? Because if we don't know at the point at which it happened, it will be difficult for us to go back. You must know the point at which you miss your path or miss your way for you to go back there and then reroute your movement. Now, the incursion of the military was the beginning of the trouble of this country. At the moment and point where the military took over government, and we now began to have a situation where one man is at the center determining what happened to the rest of the country. And whether you like it or not, whatever he says stands. And then making it impossible for objectivity, and making it impossible for people to raise or ask questions. And then they are out of power and they get away with whatever it is that they have done. There was loss of accountability. So you do whatever you need to do and walk away, and nobody's asking you. And that was the beginning of our trouble. And after the military were out, and we also had this democracy that we have in place, we noticed that the culture imbibed during the military days had come to become part of our life, and we have not been able, to divorce ourselves from it, particularly because the Constitution helps those who are a democratic leader today to function as if they are, military rulers.
So one more question, and I'll call upon Pastor Sonny, just following up on what you said, right? And so I want to go back to us as citizens, because I don't want us to feel that we are helpless in changing this narrative of being the one of the most corrupt nations in the world. And I believe someone had mentioned it on this platform a few months ago, that the so-called elites that are in power are less than a certain percentage of the population. We are 220 million people, or 200 million. Let's be on the conservative side. And those that rule us, if they are too much, they are 100,000. So how is it? I mean, that's even on the high side. Like, you include the local chairman, you include the kingmakers and all those. How is it that this few fraction of the percentage are the ones that set the tone of a country? What are the rest of us doing in this corruption? We are sitting back and waiting for what to happen.
Well, I believe that I'm going to come back to the issue of education. There is a gross ignorance in the country, and people believe that when somebody is in position, it is God who has put him there. You know, all the power that be. That's what the Bible says. The power that be are ordained of God. You see, but getting into power is not an ordination that is carried out by God. But once you present a man and you put him in power, God ordains that man. In a democracy, the process of deciding who becomes your leader is exclusively your responsibility. But if the person goes through the process and you say, Kabiesi, but forgive me for using the word Kabiesi, but I use that because I'm trying to make a point. Then the person becomes a power, or the person in power ordained by God. Now, this mentality of a Kabiesi and the people's mentality is what is affecting us from demanding accountability, until we begin to see that the persons who are in power, who are in government, are elected to serve the people, and it is our responsibility to demand accountability from them. We may not be able to effect a change in our society as much as we desire to have it. We all must take responsibility to do the right thing, and in doing the right thing, demand accountability from those that we have elected to serve us.
Thank you. Pastor Sonny, do you have any questions before we open it up? Because I have one more. Okay.
If you have one more, go ahead.
Okay. So again, I kind of move on the other side. Can we talk about a little bit about other corrupt leaders that are not politicians? What is the contribution of corrupt traditional leaders? What is the contribution of corrupt religious leaders to this corruption narrative in the nation? Because we are very silent on those other factors. And we tend to, if we're looking at a holistic approach, it can't be in part. We can't reform one sector where all the other sectors remain corrupt. It's not going to work. So in taking this holistic approach, what is the cost of corruption from the traditional leaders, from community leaders, and from religious leaders?
The cost of corruption from community leaders, from traditional leaders, and then from religious leaders. So we start from the community leader. The smallest unit of a community is the family. What is the cost of corruption in the family? How do what are the things we are doing to erode, the value that can sustain honesty in the family? Now, when I was growing my children and they were preparing for school, when they want to go write exam, I will tell them, please, I need to know how you perform in the exam. Examination is just a test of your ability. It will help us decide the line you need to take. Are you going to go into technical? Are you going to go into this? Are you going to, because you really don't have to be a professor. You don't have to be a doctor. You just have to be what you can be within your God-given ability. Our own responsibility as a parent is to help you achieve that. I am somebody who had never been forceful about my children, pushing them through school. I am much more interested pushing them through their line of ability, and it has worked well for me. Now, why I'm saying this is because the corruption that has to do with exam and all of that start from home. When a parent will go arrange for special center and all of that, and then you are building a life of deception. The boy or the girl doesn't merit what is brandished. And then when he gets to certain levels in life, expectation is placed on him, and he can never be able to meet up because what he has in his hand is not a reflection of the content of his personality. And so that is one area. Now, when you go back to communities, you see that the issue of the federal structure play on the small communities that we have of our villages and of this and of that. The KBAC has to be in the good book of the governor if he wants the road to their place to be tarred. And if for any reason the KBAC is not disposed to the governor in place, you'll see that there may not be development coming to that area. But if we all come to a point where we are standing for what is right, even when whoever is at the other hand will not relate with that and wants us to suffer for righteousness' sake, the way the Bible puts it, then it is okay for us to suffer for righteousness' sake. But what we have now, both in the communities and even in church, is that nobody wants to suffer for righteousness' sake. We will rather enjoy for unrighteousness' sake than suffer for righteousness' sake. And these are serious issues. It is affecting our communities. It is affecting our corporation. It is affecting our churches. So we must resolve that as for me and my house, like Joshua said, I will stand for righteousness anywhere that I find myself. I will not condone corruption. I will not be part of it. I will not fund it. I will not give myself. I will not give my support to anything that has to do with corruption.
Thank you so very much. I'm going to hand over to Pastor Sonny. So we all pay a very high price for corruption.
Absolutely, ma'am.
So I just wanted to point, and you did, you addressed all the questions that I had in really trying to understand the root cause of this corruption, not just a sectional cause of it. Thank you, Pastor Sonny.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pastor Jumoke. Doctor, I appreciate the way you have spoken about corruption. I mean, simply put, the cost of corruption is Nigeria. If you want to see corruption and what corruption can do to a nation, you only need to look at Nigeria and look further, arrested development. I have this document that Ahmed Dati, the vice presidential candidate of the Labour Party, once I had him talking about corruption on TV, and I thought that he put it so well. He broke it down into about 6 areas. He spoke about ways that we perpetrate corruption in Nigeria: inflated government contracts, unremitted revenues, extortion, starting from the 50 naira the policeman collects to the $1 million that people in offices collect before they can do anything for you. Conversion of public property, which we have seen repeatedly over and over. He spoke about criminal wastefulness, people using private jets, using all kinds of things in government. And he also looked at influence peddling, man no man, where people actually pay people millions just to sit in front of a minister so that they can make their proposal, and a whole lot of this thing. So looking at, I have broken down these corruption ways and means. Each of them will require a different way to tackle them. Because we don't, the amount Nigeria has lost to corruption are running into trillions. What I want to ask is, taking the way I've broken it down, you've had it. how can we possibly tackle each of these areas? For example, inflated government contracts. We've not had anybody being prosecuted because the inflated contract that was 1 million or undone. What can the citizens do? What can we put in our constitution in control that will ensure necessarily that we get all these kind of corruptions, loopholes blocked and arrested?
Well, thank you very much. I tend to want to agree with Dr. Dati, the area of corruption that you listed here, even though the most common one that we relate to as the corruption is in number 3, talking about extortion from the policeman on the road to the custom man at the border to, of course, the persons in offices who will move your file and all of that. That is the everyday one that we all are aware of. But now he's talking about the inflated government contract. How do we check that? Well, there are best practices around the world for contract procedures, and it's there even in our document, in our saying, but it's never there in our practice. And so we all must decide as a nation that we're going to enforce the things that are needful for us to enforce, and put structure in place to ensure that contract is not given on the basis of man no man. Contract is openly, contested for. Permit me to use that word. The bid are open, are open before the public. We heard of what happened in the media past the Ministry of Aviation and under the ministers that went away, and some of the funny things that happened with the bid process. These are situations that Constitution can address, the Code of Conduct of Ministry can address, and we can insist on making sure that people go through that process. Then you talk about unremitted resources into federal account and all of that. Like I said, sometimes you just wonder why certain things happen the way they do in Nigeria, when you know that we have, some of the best hand in the world. I can't imagine that Pastor Itwa is in Nigeria and people are making resources and they are not remitting it into the federal post, and the government doesn't know what to do, and they are not talking to Pastor Itwa and all of the people out there who are professional, and ICANN is not consulted on how to build a structure that can help us. I think it has come to the point where institutions should come to the rescue of this government, and not just individual institution of medical doctor, institution of lawyers, institution of talking about their association and their body, coming to take charge of areas that concerns them and make recommendation and give us a structure that can help us, deal with the corruption process in the country, because it has become something that each and every one of us must be part of. Then you talk about
Did our guest freeze, or is it my
conversion of public properties, which is a normal thing. Once somebody get it become his personal property, and nobody is asking question. What are the things? What are the things that belongs to Nigeria? Like I said earlier, the cost of corruption. We really have lost trillion to corruption. I believe you are being conservative. We have lost more than, it's unquantifiable, except we sit down and
did we lose his audio, or is it me?
He's frozen. I'm trying to
Okay.
reach out to him.
Okay, I think we, yeah. Okay.
Or what?
Dr. Akinyemi, you may want to turn off your video to increase your bandwidth so that we can hear you. We lost you for a minute there.
I think I'm back.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
we can. We can hear you now. Thank you.
So we talk about criminal wastefulness, and which is like a culture of being in government. The only way you can prove to your village and the people around you that you are in government is the amount of wastage that is associated with your person. And this is unfortunate. Government must be kept simple, and people in government must be humble to live a life of stewardship. And these hero kind of thing, celebrity thing attached to somebody who's called a servant is what I don't understand. We have to keep stewardship to what it is, service to the people, and then influence padding of contract sum, padding of budget has become part of our lives, and we all know what to do. These are things that can be taken care of by constitutionality.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, Pastor Sonny is in an area where his audio is not also, it's not very good. So I'll read out some of his comments, but I would like us to take the questions. There are quite a few hands up, so I'll open it up to the audience. And there is a way we usually do this. We can take 2 or 3 questions at a time, just so that you have more, you can answer more people, and that way you take those 3 questions and then you respond at once. That's usually very helpful. I can also help take notes of the questions if that helps. How do you feel about that? You're good?
That's good. Good.
Okay, so our first person, and I'm going to please ask to please keep it very succinct, direct to the point. We would really appreciate that, so that we can take more people, and our guest would also have clarity on the question that you are asking. I'm going to ask Mr. Aredo Stephen to please ask his question. Go ahead and unmute yourself. I've asked you to unmute. Please unmute yourself.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good evening, now. I just rush in now. First and foremost, there's no notification for this meeting. I have to copy the information via that various status. Secondly, is I met up in that phrase. So, and thirdly, Pastor Itua is not on ground. Fourthly, Dr. Akinyemi talk about the custodian of culture and tradition, which is the Obas, the way they have compromised the integrity that people bestowed on them. It is because mostly since 1990 date, since they have created our constitution in a way by local government chieftaincy, commissioner of chieftaincy, will be in the affair of choosing the next Oba. This Ifa Oracle is not being acknowledged again. The due process of having a king is not being observed again. And if you are using these channels to nominate a king, which is not, there is no transparency, there is no honesty, our kings too will be in the hem of corruption. Our kings will not be sincere to us because they are dancing to the tune of the slave master, the oppressor. So there is the only thing I can grab. I came in when there is an observation or discussion on the accountability of the kings. So thank you. I can.
Thank you.
Okay.
So did you have a question or you just had a comment?
That is a comment, it's not a question.
Okay. So you can put your contact information in the chat room if you want to be notified. We usually do announce that.
I did
Okay.
that last week, and
Okay.
let's say I was told why the program was done that I will be notified via my emails.
Okay.
Or any channels. So I didn't see.
Apologies if you didn't get that. I'll follow up with you after this. So if you don't mind, we'll take the next question. And again, please help us so that our guest will be able to address your questions by really clarifying what your question is. Noyo, please go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, good afternoon all. My name is Noyo Kubenje Eden. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I have another observation which will lead on to a question. With corruption, is in the individual, it's not a concept outside of the people or the citizens of a country or a community or a family. It's inside of us because we have allowed it, we have internalized it. It has become part of the way we do things, and it's not helping us. So when you look at the situation in Nigeria, the government has neglected the people. The government is not providing services to the people. People are not happy. And that's why the situation is the way it is now. It's not that corruption has not been there since we are growing up, but we do not feel it. And the impact wasn't as it is today. A lot of people are very unhappy with what is happening in Nigeria. And when that is happening in any country, any community, then you see exactly what we are seeing today. It's a survival, people are in a survival mood in whatever way. Okay, they're up there, they're not doing anything. We are down here, we do our own. So it's something, and right now we are destroying and destroying everything. So having said that, what are we going to do to make the people in leadership know the injustice, the evil that they are doing, and to know that a culture has originated from their failure to take care of the Nigerian people? What we are seeing is a country of people who are very annoyed. They are not happy at all. So whatever they get, they grab. That's what is happening. And we are taking it out to other countries, and we are getting into trouble where they are rejecting us, sending us back home. So something needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So we're going to take the third, Simon. That will be your first set. Go ahead, Simon. Please unmute yourself. Dr. Simon Nan.
My name is Professor Simeon Nuna. I'm a professor of corporate leadership. It is Dr. Bolaji Akinyemi that invited me to this. And this is my first time that you rightly pointed out. I want to take off from a quotation from the scriptures. If the foundation be destroyed, what will the righteous do? I made a comment and somebody responded when Dr. Akinyemi talked about the Constitution. And I said one of the major problems we have in this country is the Constitution. The Constitution is a fraud. You cannot put 2-3 people in a room and ask them to prepare a document, and you'll come out and say, we, the people of Nigeria, who are the we? Somebody is saying Constitution is always updated. Yes, we agree. But when you have a foundational problem, and the people that are supposed to correct it are the people that enjoy from it, how will they correct it? You saw the 2014 issue, which should have been documented. But because the guys at the National Assembly know that once those things come in, some of them are going to lose some of the largesse that's coming to them. That's why they cannot see the light of day. That's one. The second issue, so I want your comment on that. The second issue is, I think everything boils down on leadership. I'll give you a typical example. Ask Singapore. When Lee Kuan Yew came on board, And he gave a directive. If you have stolen, you have 6 months to return what you have stolen, or you'll be executed. And they thought he was kidding. After 6 months, he took up one of his brothers refused, or relations rather, refused to return, and he got him executed. And people say, this is serious. Everybody lined up. The ones that still had, that couldn't run away, had to surrender what they had. Go to that country today. You might call it a Muslim state, but my pastor went to that place and he said, he came down from the aircraft, they took his loads, and he gave them some tips. And they said, no, they don't accept it. They did their job. He went to the hotel. After eating, he dropped a tip. And the manager called him. Did you read our receipt? He said, yes, I did. He said, no, you didn't.
I'm really sorry to, I'm sorry to interject. I sincerely apologize. Could you please round up with your question, if that's okay? We have quite a few hands up. So if you don't mind just rounding up. Thank you. Appreciate.
Okay. All right. I'll round up. What I'm saying in effect is that it's all about the right person in leadership. It's all about the people. Once the leader gets it right, the people will follow. Look at the Ajokuta issue. I want comments on that. And the NNPC issue. If we had the refineries working today, we won't be where we are today. So the cost of corruption is poverty, abject poverty.
Thank you very much, sir, for those insightful contributions. Dr. Adeyemi, do you want to respond to those three? Because they were mostly comments that the first three speakers presented.
Thank you, Dr. Akinyemi and not Adeyemi. Well, I think
apologies.
You're welcome. I think Agedo Stephen added to the thought by saying he who pays the piper dictate the tone, and that is what is the problem with the authorship and the emergence of persons on the stool of their forefathers. It is no longer their forefathers determining who sits on the throne. It is whoever is the commissioner of chieftaincy affairs. And these are areas we should look at in the review of the Constitution. Then the second person also just made a comment, which is about corruption as the component content of our persons as individual. And we would do well to do our best to shun corruption so that we can be better. And he also mentioned the fact that culture of corruption actually has originated from our leaders. And so this will bring to bear the need for us to call on our leaders to show good example and influence so that we can start building a new culture of honesty. And then Simeon, like you said, also just added value to the discussion. I think we can go on with the question and answer.
Thank you. So I'm going to call upon Yunusa. Please go ahead and ask your question. And then we have Joseph and then Cornel Bello Badile also. So please go ahead, Miss. I believe, I'm not sure if it's Yunusa, it's Mr. Yunusa.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. Mine is more of comments. It's a privilege that Dr. Akinyemi, I'm opportune to listen to him, and it's very succinct and straightforward. Well, with regard to corruption in Nigeria, unfortunately, I'm going to make comments, and like I said before, I want to try to make it as snappy as possible. Corruption will continue to thrive in Nigeria as long as there's poverty. And as long as we continue to run a system where Nigerians are promoted, appointed based on sentiment, where you come from, Nigeria will go no step forward. I can assure anybody that cares to listen. As long as we are not appointing and promoting based on merit and merit alone, accepting that every Nigerian is a Nigerian, asking for the best hand to do the job, Nigeria is not going anywhere. And therefore, if I'm going to suggest anything in constitutional review, the first thing that make Nigeria for Nigerians. Remove every sentiment. Every Nigeria is supposed to serve individual and not tribe, not culture. So therefore, issue of corruption will continue to be there for as long as we throw away meritocracy and put sentiment of where you come from, who knows you, which unfortunately is in a constitution, Federal Character Commission, for God's sake. You want Nigeria to get to move ahead. I'm going to give a brief example to conclude my discussion. Like China said, he said, we don't practice democracy. We practice meritocracy. And this story actually comes from a ship that is about sinking. They have about 50 captain of ship inside that ship, and there are about 500,000 people inside that ship who are novice about ship. It's now come to a situation where they have to take a decision that this ship should not sink. Will you now ask for democracy that, okay, all of you give your opinion and majority vote, or you ask for that 50 people who knows what to do and how to do it? And this is why Nigerians may continue to sink for as long as we throw away merit and we put our decisions, promotion, appointments based on where you come from. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that. May I have Mr. Joseph, please? Those will be the
good evening. Good evening. My name is Joseph Anurukem. Professor Akinyemi has done so much on corruption, and thank God for the contribution of Professor Nna. I still don't understand, since I became old enough, I've been hearing corruption being discussed in forums, in symposium. Yet, corruption continued. What are we going to do? Professor Nna talked about, if the foundation is bad, what would the righteous do? The bane of our corruption in this country today is the 1999 Constitution. If it is not repealed or amended, we'll continue to go round and round, be discussing corruption at the end of every year, nothing is done. Corruption, our Constitution has given right to people who are not qualified to be in the position. Nigeria is the only country that I've known in this country. I read political science. I have never seen or heard any country who employs people as citizens in their federal institution based on federal character. Federal character has to be do away with at this time. Dr. Akinyemi talked of meritocracy. How can you be talking about meritocracy when there is no level playing ground? How do you justify a system or a situation where a person, a student, scored 285 in JAMB, was not given his course of study, and somebody who scored 102 getting the same course because the federal character needs to be filled? I want Dr. Bolaji Akinyemi, how do we right this wrong? That is one. Another thing, we, the led, we don't question, we don't query people's source of wealth. I'll give you an instance.
Sir, could you please round up? We have, if you don't mind, I really apologize. We have quite a few hands up. So if you have to, you have about 15 seconds.
He was unable to rent a good 3-bedroom apartment. He was actually living
Mr. Joseph, we've lost your audio, so we are going to move on to the next.
In a big office. This guy was half of the street where he was living. And
Mr. Joseph,
the people are clapping.
Mr. Joseph, apologies.
I'm done.
We lost part of your old audio there. I just wanted to let you know that we lost part of your audio. So you may want to type in the second part of your question in the chat, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You got
sir.
the first one.
Yes, we got the first one. The second one was choppy. So if you could write it in, because your audio was choppy. Thank you.
Okay, calls were coming in, that's why.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akinyemi. I do agree with you that poor education or lack of education is responsible for corruption in the last 10. But then, why blaming the Constitution? How many people know the historical background of the 1999 Constitution? How many people know that the 1999 Constitution is a combination of the 1979 Constitution written by Williams and a part of Caribbean White's Constitution? Please, sir, what part of the Constitution is wrong and what part is responsible for what we are having after 24 years of operating the same Constitution? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. So over to you, Dr. Akinyemi.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think Joseph answered his question by calling for the need to repeal or amend the 1999 Constitution. So I believe that's the way to go. But talking about this last question, wanting to know which part of the Constitution is right and which part of the Constitution is wrong. I think the spirit of the Constitution is the issue, that same Constitution, if we have sat down together and arrive at it as the way we want to live together, I don't think there should be an issue. When you go into a marriage relationship, before the priest, the vow is taken. The husband knows what the commitments are, or rather the bride knows what the commitments are. The bridegroom also know. And then at the end of the day, they sign the dotted line and then they seal their agreement. In our case as a nation, these things were put together for us, by those who wanted the country to go in a certain way and for them to hold the nation down in their peculiar way. And that is what we have seen over time. And for as long as we keep that as our article of union, we will always have this aggression, this rancor, this quarreling, because nobody can come out and say it is a part of the decision for us to live the way we are living, and that in itself is a problem. No matter how lofty it is, the first spirit of a constitution is agreement. People coming together to agree to say this is the way we want to live together. That agreement element is not there in our national life, and it's enough a room for chaos and all of the things that we are experiencing. I want to join well-meaning Nigerians across that one critical decision we must take now is sit to decide on how we want to live together and document it, and then let it have the spirit of we, the people of Nigeria. Let it be an
Our host is frozen.
We lost you.
Yeah, you are frozen again, Dr. Akinyemi.
agreement.
If I may suggest, you may want to turn off your camera so that you have more bandwidth. That might be so we can hear you more. Dr. Akinyemi.
But not the South. We actually want
He's frozen.
We are trying to reach out to him.
Yeah. And then maybe when you reach out to him, can you please tell him maybe he should turn off his camera so that
Noted.
he has more bandwidth.
Okay, we'll do that.
So thank you all.
Meanwhile, can we read some of the comments? There are a lot of comments on the
In the chat room.
Yeah, questions and comments.
There's quite a lot. So I'm not even sure where to start from. So let me start from the very top. While we're waiting here, just give me a second. So the truth is, and this is from, let me start with this one. The truth is that people in government, public officers, civil servants, legislators all believe they have to make money for themselves. As a result, everybody from the lowest to the highest think they must have their own part of the so-called national cake. The corruption, I would rather call it stealing and dishonesty, is now endemic. I see no cure. And the traditional rulers must have their own share too. What means of income do they have? The second comment, we must call corruption what it is, not any fancy name. Not any fancy name. Sorry, I'm scrolling. Do not call it smartness or sharpness, call it corruption, period. Calling it a fancy name makes it look like a cool fad, which is tolerable.
Kindly mention the name of the people.
Oh, this is from the first one I read was from Chief Tolu Igodalo. The second one is from Mrs. Helen Essien. We must also never give absolute power to leaders. There must be checks and balances. Okay, then the next comment, there must be checks and balances. Then Chief Tolu's second comment is solution. I like that there's proffering solution here. Public service salaries and all income must be at a wage level. Public education must be available for those who cannot afford private education. Availability of public health, good transportation, rail, water, and motorable roads. That's the solution to ending corruption. If everyone gets basic living necessities as citizens, then we'll thrive. Mr. Perfect, Ojo Daniel, his comments, we know we have corrupt people leading us. The question is, how do we train and build the people who will take over from them, not being corrupt when we say shy away from it, even in our own worship places? And Kwesi Sampson, questionable wealth should be seriously addressed. Then Ene Tamuno, as part of institutionalizing accountability, we must first reestablish societal norms away from the end justifies the means mentality. Our value system is upside down. In Japan, a corrupt official who is accosted will commit harakiri, suicide, for letting down his family and tarnishing their name. In Europe, such an official would resign in the first instance, would most likely be prosecuted. In Nigeria, a corrupt official can rise to whatever high office he or she desires. This must be seriously, okay. We can go on, there's so many comments here that we can all read. And I think part of the conversation here is we shouldn't just see corruption as just a section of the, or just a sector It's all around. And what is our role and our responsibility in this change, in changing the narrative? We've seen it work in other nations, where the citizens, it becomes the citizens' mandate. And I kind of like that we as Nigerians, we must take back our mandate. It's our country. We can change the narrative and dictate how we want this country to run. It's run before, it's run very well before. And someone did say that, yes, there was corruption, but it was minimal and there was accountability. So it starts with us as individuals taking responsibility for it. And I think Dr. Akinyemi is back in.
Is back.
Okay, good. Thank you. So the last hand we are going to take is Mr. Jonathan Sunday Akuns, so that we can also give our guest time. We have about a few hands up. So I'll take Dr. Akifa Kunda, and then, I think he dropped, maybe Otumba. If we can have Otumba Udubemi. Please go ahead, sir, with your question. Otumba, please go ahead with your question. Otumba,
Hello,
JK.
it's not really, good evening all, maintaining the protocol, existing protocol. It's not really a question. It's just a comment and clarification. By virtue, one, it is true that we have problem with our constitution, no doubt about that, because as of today, we have over 120 clauses that is skewed to people in the north. And also, it's also in constitution that in that constitution, we have Islam Sharia law being mentioned about 12 times without any references to any other religion. And secondly, we've had problem of competition because we don't have value system. Indonesia was in a worse position than we are. They only adopted 3 clauses: meritocracy, pragmatism, and honesty. And because they're visionary about it, that is the reason why today Indonesia has turned to be a developed nation. What I see in our own case is that because of the impunity, because of lack of consequence action, because of the fact that we don't run by value, what values do we have? The only value that we have is impunity and corruption. Those are the 2 things. Because at the end of the day, it is through lack of this value system that our leader don't have a focus. Proud to this time around, we've been complaining about bad leader. And we said that's the reason why we don't have good governance. But as of today now, we have terrible citizens. And when you have terrible citizens, it will inform the quality of leadership. And that also will affect the quality of governance. And also the concept of entitlement mentality. Everybody shout of marginalization. Because the general concept is that Nigeria belongs to no one. Incidentally, anybody that comes in there now uses 2 instruments, which is ethnic bigotism and religious bigotism. You will find out that this is an instrument that have played for over time, and that instrument is still up today. And because most of the positions are traditionalized, the politician, the hegemonic political leadership, what they have done now is this: they've used these 2 instruments, which is electricity and religious bigotism, to keep people in perpetual captivity and also to impoverish people. And this issue is still lingers on now. As of today, there are a lot of people juggling for position. The people who serve with the former president don't want to go. The governors who have finished their time don't want to go. The senators who lost their seat don't want to go. And also there are people who believe that they work for the present president. They don't want to go. How many positions do we have? So I think the question is this: we need to have a paradigm shift. We need to be vision. We need to have a definite vision. Look at what we do. Vision 2020 has gone to 2030. 2030 is now going to 2063. So I want to submit that yes, we have skilled approach in constitution. The conclusion is defrauded. You can imagine they spent 10 billion naira to be able to look at them. As up to today, there's no sign of the constitution. I just want to submit that, one, Nigeria, do we ask the question? Do we have the right question? We don't ask the right question. How can we get the right answer? Look at how the impunity in NNPC. Look at how the impunity at the state level and at the local government level. As I speak to you now, there's 2 trillion they're going to dispute across length and breadth, and the states are run down. Out of 36 states we have in Nigeria, only 4 is viable. That 4 is viable because the general internal revenue, they themselves too, they are reckless with the kind of recurrent expenditure. I want to believe that we should ask the right question to get the right answer, and also we should show concern from local government level to state and also to federal. That's the only way, because local has about 20%, federal state has about 24%, and the federal have 56%. We know at the federal level they are supposed to do tertiary intervention, but what we have seen over the past is that tertiary intervention is substituted for primary intervention in the north, and you can imagine the entire north is in state of comatose, and whereas the humongous wealth that is going that did not show, and they are also creating a question of instability. And
Thank
there are 2
you
things
so
you cannot
much,
do.
sir.
Corruption has led to this cultural and religious war. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for, I know you're very passionate about this. I can hear it. And I'm sure it's issues we'll be addressing. I'm going to call on Dr. Akin Fakunda, and then please pray for Nigeria media. Please go ahead and change your name so that we can call you. And then we have Mr.
Simple question.
Okay.
Simple question. We're in agreement about our problems. How do we and get results? The political class, they're in their own world. They are deaf to what we are saying. We are just grumbling and grumbling and grumbling. How do we bridge the divide? How do we attract their attention? That's my question.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate you keeping it very short. Pray for Nigeria media. Please go ahead and change your name. We have a couple more hands that we'll take, and we would begin to close. Mr. Femi Olowe, and then I have 2 more hands. So please go ahead, Mr. Femi Olowe. Please keep it very brief. Really appreciate that.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I could see that people are hungry, so it's not just being passionate about it. People are hungry when the topic corruption is being treated. Okay, my questions are just 2. Number 1 is looking at the current set of politicians that we have in the country, seeing what is happening in oil sector and all other sectors. Does our professor, Dr. Bolaji Akinyemi, does he believe that this current set of politicians will have or can have the willpower to fight corruption? That is one. The second point is this: if we have anyone who is willing already to fight corruption at the helms of the affair, do you advise the person to fight corruption in retrospect, or you should fight corruption going forward? Those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to just take one more hand. Mr. Debo Adeleye, please go ahead with your question. Again, pray for Nigeria. We do ask that people change it to their name so that we know who is asking the question. So I'm sorry, just ask you to change it, or you can put your name in the chat so that we can call upon you. Go ahead, Mr. Debo.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I want to say thank you to the speaker for a very thought-provoking lecture. So I have 2 questions. The first one is about meritocracy and this principle of federal character. Do you think one has to go for the other, or both can work simultaneously because of the complex nature of our country, Nigeria? Secondly, I also want to find out what is the place of extreme poverty and hunger in Nigeria, in perpetuating the culture of corruption, because I don't think if there is so much hunger in the land, there's so much poor people, poverty has been weaponized repeatedly. How does that impact eradicating or minimizing corruption in our country? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this is the last hand I see up, which is Dr. Olushola. So maybe we can take all of it. So go ahead, Dr. Olushola, with your question, please. Dr. Olushola. So we've asked you to unmute. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
The question is not the question, but is a contribution. The cost of corruption is what we are looking at, the cost of corruption in Nigeria. It is mainly corruption is dishonest gain, which have effect on the people. And the constitution that I agree with a lot of people, constitution we are practicing is a Unitarian constitution. And wherein you have Unitarian constitution, where you have the oligarchy and mafia, definitely there will be a corruption. That is the breeding and the growing ground for corruption in any given country. But with this constitution, it has increased, blowing it up. Not that there is no corruption beforehand, but this has blown it up. The magnitude of the corruption we are witnessing this day is enormous. And that is one of the very important things we have to do in this country. I have been praying for this country for over 30 years. Pray for Nigeria have started over 30 years. And when the last time Dr. Akinyemi was there, the last 30 years that we asked God, what is our problem? If the foundation be destroyed, what can the righteous do? We have to go back to the old landmark of the independence that have been removed. So when we go back and readopt what we have thrown away, when you throw away something that is good, definitely the evil things we pursue. And the evil that pursue Nigeria has catch up with Nigeria. It is now time to take back what we have left. A lot of people look at things like a personality is going to help us. It's not a personality. It's not the politicians. In some years back, 70s, toward the ending of 70s, we saw some country came to Nigeria. Somebody mentioned Indonesia. Indonesia came to Nigeria for grant aid. United Arab Emirates came to Nigeria. Singapore has come to Nigeria for grant aid when we are practicing the constitution handed over to us at the freedom, independence, when we are practicing it and we are developing. This country came in and studied that constitution very well, and they take it away to their country and implement it. Today, they are developed, united, strong. So it is now that we need to look at the things critically. Chile is a country, was handed over with a dictatorship Unitarian constitution. They see to it and then leave it. And the citizen now acts, including their National Assembly, all of them now work together and bring and adopt new constitution. They went into referendum and get a new constitution. And the new constitution is helping them. So it is better for Nigerians to go back to where we are falling. Say, oh, Nigeria, where you are falling. We are falling somewhere. And where we are falling, we have to go back there and then come up again. Even if it's me, we are going to go by 36 regional states, and the local governments, the towns, the community also will be, they're also part of the state region, that's state, regional, whatever, self-develop.
Thank
we
you.
will see a a new country. No personality. Let me tell you, a lot of people, I told them, I said, I'm not interested in any candidate because none of them can do anything with that constitution on ground. It will breed more.
Thank you very much, sir, for those very insightful contributions. Appreciate. So, Dr. Akinyemi, thank you. You have all these comments. If you can take all of them, those were all the hands that were up. And if you could address those, and then with your closing remark. And then we have a few announcements here from ALG and also comments from Pastor Sonny Enebi, the first VP, that I would be sharing with all of us. So please go ahead, sir, with your response and your closing remarks. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much. I want to quickly respond to Femi Olowe, who did ask the question, is there a willpower on the part of those who are political leaders at this present moment to fight corruption? All we need to do is look at the antecedent of the persons who are leaders presently. Where are they coming from and where they are? And for that, I will conclusively say that I do not see such willpower at fighting corruption. And then he asked the question, should fighting corruption be in retrospect or in going forward? I know that the political leaders today, if they have to adopt one of the options that Femi Olowe put before us, they will opt for going forward. But we know that it's a folly for you to say you want to go forward when you have not addressed your past, critically. The problem we have is more of where we're coming from, and except we address it. So I will suggest that we fight corruption in retrospect to possibly appreciate where we are now and then determine where we want to go. And then we can now begin to fight corruption also going forward. That would be my take on that. And then we look at Mr. Debo, I guess, Adeleye, who asks meritocracy and federal character, if it's possible for us to have a blend. I believe Nigeria is a nation that we are used to blending even the unblendable. I cannot fathom how we hope to be able to blend meritocracy and federal character. Both are alien to one another. It's either we are doing away with federal character and we are embracing meritocracy. One of the basic problems that we have at powering Nigeria on merit is because we believe that everybody should head for government, and then we allow sentiment to determine those who come into government as our leaders. And because of that, we don't have the best of men. I believe that the best, our government should actually be in the hand of the best of our men and women, and then so that we can open up the other sector and government can be able to create employment opportunity, because the people with capacity and capability to make that happen are in government. But what we have seen is shrinking opportunity, because the people who are there to manage the rest of us cannot expand on the opportunity that the office provide for them. And then he went on to talk about what is the place of poverty and hunger at perpetrating corruption, where the two tools of corruption is what you have just mentioned. Poverty play a major role, same thing for hunger. And the people, the political class have employed this as a tool to recruit many foot soldiers who are fighting on their side just for a piece of meal. And until we address the issue of education and the issue of welfare program, not from the political perspective, but from the need for us to educate, or rather to feed the hungry among us, we may not be able to come to the place we ought to be as a nation. Talking about constitution, somebody cited United Arab Emirates as an example, that came to borrow the 1963 constitution from Nigeria. And we see each of these emirates relating together at the center, where each and every region are doing their best to add to the value of the country. So if the 1963 constitution is working as adopted by United Arab Emirates, I say again that the reason we are where we are is because the military came and shut down a working constitution, an article of union that gave us the memory of the best of Nigeria that we have ever witnessed till date. And going back to that 1963 constitution, reviewing it to accommodate where we are today, because the region had been broken into pieces, into states. So I think that is one decision we need to take at fighting corruption. And my closing remark will be for us to look at this beyond dot discussion. What can we do to put before every Nigerian the cost of corruption? Not just in too many words, but in figures. Can we quantify what we have lost to corruption from 1999 till date, while we are preparing for 2027, so that we all can appreciate, the wastage that corruption has cost us, the future or the today that corruption has cost us, and going forward, what is our expectation? And then we can begin to plan and pursue a glorious tomorrow.
Thank you very much, sir, for those very insightful contributions. And I have a couple of comments from Pastor Sonny, but before I read his comments, I also want to add that the cost of corruption, as you said, is more than just monetary loss. For everyone that has lost their lives on a bad road that money was allocated for everyone that died from poor medical care because the equipments were not there and they were supposed to, for so many things here, for the talents that have been lost because of poor education, for those that have even left the country because of poor opportunities, for our youths that have to now repurpose their talents to something else. So that cost is very, very high. And we as Nigerians must really take inventory of that cost as individuals, as a society, and as a nation. And one thing that I also want us to think about, that we should not lose sight of our own responsibility in this cost of corruption. We can't point at everyone else while we continue to perpetuate practices, whether it's bribing the policeman, whether it's bribing someone to get a form, and we believe that that's part of just the culture. We have a role to play in changing the narrative. That's my contribution. And then I'm going to read Pastor Sonny's comments and then bring up Mr. President with any of his. So he's proffering action items to fight corruptions, like tangible things that we can do to fight corruptions. One, bill on inflated contracts. How do we ensure that there is a bill passed that kind of holds perpetrators accountable or prevents the inflation of contracts? Two, the use of technology to fight corruption and then lead by example. The fourth, stop use of cash for all government transactions. That is one way to stop corruption. Use of technology for collection of all government revenue. No cash must be paid directly to any government agency. And part of use of technology, use CCTV in all government revenue collection agencies and police stations. And then the last point, also a bill, let's advocate for a bill to appoint independent auditors for all MDA and agencies and states to audit them yearly and publish it before the next budget can be released to them. So that's my senior VP's contribution to this. I will bring up Mr. President to give the closing remark, and we have some announcements. We would just like you to stick with us 5 more minutes. We know we are really spent on time. So over to you, Mr. President. Thank you so much, Dr. Akinyemi. Really appreciate this, and I'm going to go back and listen to it because there are a few nuggets there that I also want to really build on.
Pleasure mine. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay.
I think I'll go back and listen to it too. Okay, because I was picking up bits and pieces and here and there. And I want to thank you, my brother, for being here, for speaking your mind and speaking out. I want to thank all those who asked questions. A lot of those questions were quite passionate. A lot of people were speaking their heart and all that and all that. And at the time, it was a challenge trying to moderate. But I think we did a decent job of being practical and truthful about what we're going through. And we do hope that somehow or the other, we will be able to find a solution to corruption. No nation can really make progress if you don't tackle corruption, because it leads to misallocation of resources and the wrong emphasis on the wrong things. And it celebrates a mediocrity and sycophancy, rather than hard work and diligence and consistency. And then it leads to a lot of social problems in that people just don't have what they need when they need it, and so on and so forth. And that's the real pain. So I'm hoping that we will be able to tackle it and dissuade people from it. It won't happen overnight, but with consistency, with a determination, with sincerity, I'm sure bit by bit, it will begin to help. You know, any nation that has really thrived, the US in this 17th, 18th, and 19th century, they had to fight corruption head on. The UK, the same thing. Germany, I believe the same thing. Singapore, definitely, they had to tackle it and make sure the place was corruption-free. I think the Chinese are still going through their battles. Some parts are, some parts are not. And the Indians the same. But the more we can get a righteous nation, the more the nation will be exalted. Thank you very much, Doctor. We're really, really appreciative of what you've done today. Jumoke, thank you. Pastor Sonny, thank you very, very much. Let me thank those in the back office, Faye, Olu. Thank you so much, and all the other members of our governing board, and our great audience who are always here encouraging us and keeping us going every day. Marcella, it's always great to see you. One day, I hope you come to Nigeria. You're still in South Africa, I think. And of course, Bambo, I always see you here and there. And,
hello, everyone. I'm still in South Africa. I'll be here for 1 more month. And yes, I have been invited to Nigeria and Ghana, but I would like to come to Nigeria first.
Okay, you can do both at the same time. There's just 1 hour between them. So you can do 3 days here, for 2 days there. And you'll be just, yeah.
Oh, we'll plan it. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. Thank everyone for coming. Deji Hastrop. I hope this is my Deji Hastrop. Long time no see. God bless you. Adiola, thank you. Mrs. Abiono Ojomo, thank you. God bless you.